I think it was unfortunately, I use the word unfortunately, it's we're part of the problem. You know, we've allowed it to happen. And so, no,
and where do you, if you were to find a source or at least get your finger pointer out and point to none of these things just happen overnight. They're gradual over time, right? It's kind of a loaded question because I have my opinions, but when and where did this start happening? And there's like everything, there's some good that's come from this, but was an agenda. And I always believe the more I understand these evolutions of ideologies, they start in our schools. They start in the first grade, the second grade, the third grade, and then by the time junior high, and you could see it. And I've had those meetings. I've had those conflicts with at the time, my children's teachers or principals and stuff. And you can just see over time, particularly in California, how this has progressed. And now this is the workforce, right? So
so Jim, let me ask you this. What's the topic we're talking about right now?
I think the topic is leadership, because that's something you're writing about, right? I'm interested to hear more about what you wrote about, and we can reflect on that. And then I think the topic is also worldviews and ideologies. And one group believes you should go this direction, especially in business and life. But then you have either a school system or a government that has a whole other agenda that I'm starting to realize now is much more divided than ever before. And they're determined to push that on a generation, for good or for bad. That's very subjective.
And I think that I agree with you, and I think the reason that you and I are talking about this, and that this is becoming, I think, what's the phrase you use? I'm becoming more aware of this, is because of the pushback that it's getting now.
Yeah.
I think that's creating an awareness. And it's a couple things in my estimation, because I remember I told you that, and I think you might have even seen it. It was on 1975 or something, 77. And it was like a Dick Cavett show or Merv Griffin show or something like that. And it was a KGB agent who had defected to the United States. And long story short, he said, you guys, we've been doing this for a while. We're sending students over here. The Chinese are doing it. The Russians are doing it. And we're putting them in your academic institutions under the guise of giving them a good education. But what we're doing, we're planting seeds of communism, right, and socialism. And in 25 years or 30 years, these students will become the faculty and the administrators of these schools. And they have.
Absolutely.
And so as ridiculous as that sounded in 1975, this guy ended by saying, if you keep it up, if you let this continue to go on, there's not going to be any place for somebody like me to defect to.
That's right.
That's what he said. So I think it's big. It's much bigger. It's not yesterday. It's not last year. It's 25, 30 years ago. And it started with, what's that guy's name who wrote the book, the playbook that Obama followed? Ames? No, I can't remember his name. I should have that on the tip of my tongue. But anyway, I think it's big. I think it's infected academia. I think it's certainly been infecting Hollywood for a long, long time. I think you got it in places like the teachers union. I think you got it now. You got it in corporate America. I mean, look at what's going on recently. But these idiots at Anheuser-Busch that think they can put a mentally ill he/she on their Bud Light commercials, and that's going to actually attract less than 1% of the population instead of the 50%.
Makes no business sense.
It's none. None of these things make any business sense, Jim. And I think we talked a little bit about diversity, equity, inclusion in the last episode or one of the previous ones. So I don't want to go too deep into that. But what we're talking about here is, like you had mentioned to me earlier, we're putting people in positions that aren't qualified to do the job. The first guy that comes to mind is Pete Buttigieg. What makes him qualified to be the Secretary of Transportation? Not a fucking thing, right?
Well, I think the other question we have to ask is, how many people did we pass over that were qualified?
That's right.
And this is identity politics. There's no question that the identity politics has become more important than the well-being of the country. The best.
He got the job. He got the job because he was articulate homosexual. That's why he got the job.
That's right. And why do you believe that Kamala Harris was selected to be the vice president with Joe Biden? because of
she
her
has-
qualifications, because of her experience in politics. No, she didn't have any of that.
She's a dark-skinned female.
That's right. That's right. So
And
yeah, I
don't
think
I think we got to stop letting people get away with not talking about this.
well, I'm very encouraged by this Bud Light thing, and I normally don't get that involved in this, but there's so many layers to this that I don't believe most people know. It was not the transgender video that really sparked this. Quite frankly, it's a spark that created an explosion. There was a buildup for years and years, right? Someone, in fairness to Bud Light, they just happened to be walking by the wrong pipeline with a spark, and they let it go. And they also deserve this. Bud Light will never ever be the same. And it wasn't the video; it was the VP of marketing.
Yeah,
Alyssa, I don't know her last name, but
it's called hubris. It's arrogance and entitlement.
It is absolutely arrogance. It's also a white elite that somehow is become part of this white guilt, as that's an honor. That's
let's go into that white guilt thing. Let's
Okay.
go into that white guilt thing. Not to cut you off, please continue, but let's come back to that.
Yeah. So I think if you go and listen to what she was saying, she was hired to be the VP of marketing for the brand Bud Light, right? And she was basically bragging to her friend on a podcast about her vision for the brand and how the brand and the number one rule in business, right? You don't criticize your customers. And that's what she was doing. She came out and said
she was flipping them the bird.
She was flipping birds. She says they're fratty, they're bratty, and this and this and that. And that's what triggered this. And I don't think it's fair for this Mulvaney video. I don't think people really care that much. Okay, it was like you said, that was their thing, and that was one part of it. But this stuff is being pushed down our throats. It's not even a choice any longer. And this is an interview, this Blackrock. So I'll get to the kind of the core of this. This is, I did a deep dive, and now I at least understand, not that I'm an expert in this, but I have a conceptual understanding of, let's just say, the two metrics. So it used to be that corporations were run based solely on the value that they created in the market, and of course, for the stockholders, right? Or stakeholders, stockholders. So, but this, ESG, DEI, diversity, inclusion,
equity and
I'm
inclusion.
screwing it up. Diversity, equity, and inclusion.
You don't want those words in your mouth.
I can't. You're right. I have such a hard time with them. I have to read them because they're so. Anyway, he was being interviewed on this Blackrock. This guy runs Blackrock, whatever this, the president, and he said these are behaviors that are going to have to be forced. So it's him and these globalists that have made this decision that they're going to force this down our throats. And since they control all, pretty much all the money in the world, they're going to only loan to companies or invest in companies that follow their doctrine and matrix. So she was hired to increase the score, not just to increase business. And again, I don't think, if people conceptually don't understand, they created a whole new rule book. They created a whole new method of tracking what they seem to be as progress. And it's frightening. I don't care who you are. It's everything against capitalism as we know it.
Well, it's a few things in my estimation. It's trying to change human nature. And that's why I don't think it's sustainable, because I think when you force people to change their human nature, they revolt, they rebel, they push back, because that's to someone's core. If you're going to tell me I need a different value system, I'm going to tell you to fuck off. Right. So that's like harming my child, like just underneath hurting my kid. That's how I feel about that. And the white guilt thing is just one subset of this, right? I think it's all propaganda, Jim. And I think it's propaganda because history will tell you that propaganda works.
Oh,
It works
yes.
in China,
Very
it works
effective
in
over
Russia,
time.
it
Yeah.
worked with Hitler in Germany,
Right.
it worked with Mao, it worked
Absolutely.
everywhere it's pushed, it works. We're being propagandized is what we're being. I don't remember the exact day, it was a couple of years ago now, when I first saw a video of a white person kneeling down to a black person, and not even because the black person asked them to. They just stopped in the middle of the street and kneeled down and started apologizing to this black person.
This is during the BLM.
It was disgusting. Yeah, it was at the beginning.
First, as a human being, how do you respect somebody that has no dignity? I mean, and what if, who taught you to do that? At any point in life, you don't give up your dignity for somebody else's in exchange for they to give you something back. I mean, that is the most unattractive thing.
It's not only that, Jim. It's this black person didn't ask for anything.
No.
Probably was equally as embarrassed. Like, what are you doing?
And you're right, embarrassed and uncomfortable.
Uncomfortable and disrespected. And and the person that was kneeling didn't do or say anything worthy of an apology. This is, if you think about that, this is like insidious. This is evil, right?
It's also insulting to the person you're doing to, because how do you, maybe they did everything on their own. What are you saying to them, that without me, I'm valid? Like you need me in order for you to be somebody more than you are. It's
disgusting. It's disgusting. It's like now Black Lives Matter is going bankrupt, and the two women that are, or I guess they're women that are at the helm are criminals. They've taken all of that money and used it for their own self gain. They haven't distributed it.
Millions and millions of dollars of corporate money was given to this organization. Nothing to show for it. Nothing.
Black people didn't get any of it.
None.
You know. Yeah. And then the reparations discussion. All of this stuff is like, why are we looking into the past to determine how we should behave now and apologize for things that our great grandparents may have done? You know, it's just like, you can't. No one is willing, at least on the left side of this discussion, no one is willing to say, you have to look at the behavior of the people during the time they were behaving.
You're right. To be fair to history, you cannot extrapolate from today's time to that time. It's just so unfair.
No, you can't. I mean, you could just pick an example. It's like, who brought the first African-American slaves over here? African-American kings.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. So we didn't even begin the process. How much slavery still exists in the world? It's everywhere except here.
Yeah. And the final days of slavery, many of the slave owners were African-American.
That's right. That's right. There is no, they're cherry picking stuff. Everyone is taking advantage of compassion. Everyone's taking advantage of, it's disgusting. But, you know, and look what's going on.
So let's get it. What do you think the core root of this is? What do you think? Where does this come from? It's again a kind of a loaded question. I think it comes from two sources. Number one, which is I think completely fallen apart in a good way, and that's the media, because they know it grabs people and it appeals to their monkey brain, right? And it sells things, and and also politicians, because they do the same thing to get votes. They're one of the same. I think they're disgusting human beings in some cases because of how they're not at all interested or authentic about really getting the true story out. They're not, I'm not saying all politicians, I'm not saying all media. I think there's some great journalists out there that really want to get information out as it is. And I know there's great politicians that want to make change, but it's evolved, especially this Democratic Party, in my opinion, to the point where they know they can win elections by these trigger topics, by
I mean, look at
dividing us.
It's the division to separate us.
Division politics, right? Yeah. Identity politics, and it's just gross. If you cared all about your country or about the future, you wouldn't let this happen. I also think we've been compromised. I know that's a kind of conspiracy right wacko kind of thing. But I do believe we have been compromised. It's not the first time that a politician has been paid to receive short-term benefits for long-term negative things. Their family's fine. I mean, look at Nancy Pelosi. That's the best example. You know, that
they're all good examples. I mean, dude, I just heard on the radio the other day that they're about to release like 10,000 pictures from Hunter Biden's laptop.
Wow.
Some of which include his brother's wife, like naked, you know? I mean, these people are, I think that this is such a disgusting thing that it's difficult for some people to believe. It's so far-fetched. It's so conspiratorial. It's such bad behavior that people are like, that's not true. That's not true. And the powers that be in the Justice Department and the FBI are controlling the flow of information. They're not releasing certain bits of information and they're releasing other. I mean, it was
to protect them for their own self-gain.
It was 2.5 years until we saw all the footage from the 6th of January. You know, we saw an edited, shortened clip of only bad things. There was a whole 60 more minutes or 15 hours, I can't remember what it was, of peaceful meandering throughout the Capitol, hand in hand with the Capitol Police, opening doors, showing them things, walking around, saying prayers. You know, it was bullshit. It was all bullshit. But, and it's unfortunate because now nobody knows who to trust, right?
That's right. It is unfortunate on both sides of the aisle, right? It's
so I think you have to investigate, and you have to do your own critical thinking, and you have to connect actions to words. You know, you have to connect actions to words, right? And consistency, you look for consistency, you look places where the math works. I was watching a video the other day, and this is a scientist, a PhD in meteorology, who's been ostracized from, she's not getting any more grant money. She's not getting any academic consideration. Nobody's interested in her white papers anymore. And she went into the private sector, and she's helping other governments and private companies prepare for what she believes is the truth about climate change, which is, it is worthy of some attention. But if we continue to push this green thing, we're going to destroy ourselves. The infrastructure is not in place. There's no supply chain in place. Right. We don't have the necessary resources, you know, and the earth is strong. The earth has been through far more significant shifts in climate, ice ages and ice melting. And you know, and it's like,
you've been on an airplane and drove around and saw the water lines on the mountains. I mean,
it's another political agenda that's being driven for power, control, and money, right? Look at the industries that have popped up in support of these green initiatives. I watched a video of a truck taking one fan from a turbine up a mountain. The resources required to get that blade up the mountain and install the blade exceeded the savings that we would get from that one wind turbine for 50 years.
How about all the birds it's going to kill?
Birds it's going to kill. It's fucking up the dolphins and the whales and the fish when they put them in the water, it messes with their patterns and their temperatures. I mean, we're destroying ourselves in pursuit of this ridiculous agenda. And if you go back to Al Gore, wrote that book 10 years ago, every single prediction he predicted has not come to fruition. And he walked away with $300 million. And no one's ever held him accountable. He never got in trouble.
But he did create this carbon credit. A lot of it's come from that. So it's not like they didn't double down on some of that stuff, but it's you know, if a 13-year-old from Norway or Sweden or whatever, Greta Thunberg, is going to tell me how I should feel about climate change, all they're doing, and that's the other thing that's disgusting about this, is they're scaring our youth. They're frightening our kids. It's very sad because you could see, and you can't blame, I'm talking the 20, 30-year-olds, they're jaded. They don't feel good about the future. They feel like, and they have been kind of screwed in many ways, right? We talked about this before in terms of being able to buy a home, student debt. They really got a bad hand. So you can't blame them. And how about this stuff with COVID, that now that the information is coming out, we've been lied to. They've been lied to. How do you have trust in the government when later on you find out the facts about what's happened, and then naturally you don't question?
I think it's interesting in, if you just cite the reality that I haven't been out of the house today. I'm going out this afternoon, but yesterday I was out at a coffee shop and I saw multiple examples of people on their own, in their car, walking outside, or just away from everyone else, wearing a mask. What is that?
I see it all the time. It makes
what is that person thinking?
Well, they're not even wearing the mask. It's hanging down below their nose, and it's a rag. Basically, it's a face diaper that's not even been cleaned or on their face properly.
Well, what's the common denominator that drives this behavior? It's fear. Mm-hmm. We've successfully scared people into doing everything we just talked about. Critical race theory, diversity, equity, and inclusion, ESG, white guilt, masculine toxic masculinity. This LGBTQ thing. What are the Los Angeles Dodgers thinking? What are they thinking? Did you see that?
No, my understanding is they did something right or wrong. I don't even know. I remember I don't watch regular TV. I turned it off.
It's LGBTQ Pride Month, and they've invited I can't remember the name of them. What they do is they mock Christianity with disgusting displays of nudity and on crosses, and they're sisters of the blasphemous, or I don't know what the hell it is. But I mean, a lot of the players on the Dodgers are going, what the fuck are you doing? People aren't coming.
I thought they canceled it.
I don't know what the status is of it today. As of yesterday, it wasn't yet canceled. Canceled.
My understanding was the CEO of the Dodgers called up that group and said, it's off. I'm sorry. We'll do something else, but we're
good.
I don't know.
But this kind of, I don't know. It's disgusting. That word just keeps popping into my head. But I think the other thing that's happening is we're saying, if you don't bow down to, do what you're told, use the words we're telling you to use with this tiny percentage of the population, whatever it might be, then you are not a compassionate person. You're a bad person, because you're not going out of your way to do what they want you to do or say what they want you to say, which is complete bullshit. Yeah. Because what you should do and what you should say is what you want to do and what you want to say. And it should be kind. It should be thoughtful. It should be considerate. But just because it's firm and factual doesn't mean I'm being mean to anybody. Mm-hmm. Right? If they're going to take offense to something and my intention was not to offend them, that's not on me. Mm-hmm. That's on them. Okay? They got to get some fortitude. They got to stand up and, fight for yourself. Say something,
So back to white guilt. So a couple thoughts on that. First of all, I like to reflect on what Martin Luther King said. You probably know more than I do. I've obviously learned a little bit about him, but some people know a lot more I do. I'm more of a Malcolm X guy. I believe in Malcolm X's message at that time period, and still think that what he was saying turned out to be 100% right. One of the things that Malcolm X said was, don't take their money, they'll enslave you again. He was talking about welfare programs and all that. He was right. Yep. And the other one he said was, don't trust the foxy white liberals, because they're foxy, and that they'll only use you for an election. It's exactly what they did. That was in 1965, right? The year I was born. Yeah. And if you read his writings today and you didn't know it was him, you didn't put a date on it, it is dead on what they still do. It's a playbook that works effectively. In my opinion, and this is back to white guilt, the white guilt thing, there's a lot of dimensions to it. I think number one, it's your dignity you're giving up, but it's also very elitist, because what they're asking everybody else to do, those elitists never would be part of those circumstances, right? Like where you're walking into, let's just say a average or lower average income school, and you've got white kids apologizing to black kids. You have special classes, all of that. Wasn't Martin Luther King's whole vision was everybody was the same?
Mhm.
Well, if you really go and understand this diversity, equity, and inclusion, their attempt to create equity is to lower one group to allow the other one to raise. They don't even they openly say it.
Mhm.
In order to create equality, we're going to have to suppress one group, white only,
Mhm.
to let another group catch up.
Mhm.
And that's not at all what America is about, right? America is about equal, right? To have everybody should have the same opportunities for the ones that, of course, that show up and work and provide value, and you should be rewarded.
Opportunities.
And that's what's
Opportunities.
beautiful about sports,
Yeah.
too, right? Sports is the ultimate equalizer of
Yeah, I
race
mean,
and even business. If you make somebody money, I know I do quite a bit of mentoring, especially high school age athletes, and my message has always been the same the last 15 years. Number one, be proud of who you are, right? That's your nationality. That's your grandparents, your great grandparents. That's your mother. That's your father. Be proud of who you are. Number two is anything is impossible in this country, but you've got to show up, and it's hard to show up, especially if you don't have money, especially if you don't have bus fare, or you don't have the right clothes or whatever. It's hard to show up, right? When it's cold, when it's too hot, but show up and you're 80% better than everybody else.
Yep.
Yeah. And then that's what the message should be. And again, anything's possible in this country for those who want to work, but you got to work. You got to work your ass off, and you got to show up. And many of them, their parents came from different countries. They came here for these opportunities. And now in some ways, they're not going to have the same opportunities because somebody's going to decide of where everything has to be equal. If you're in a room of 100 people and 14% of the population happens to be African-American, then what does that mean? You need 14 African-Americans in order to have the meeting or to do anything? Like, it's ridiculous, right?
it is ridiculous. And there's other kind of insidious core things going on here, which is we're seeking out things to complain about, and instead of saying, what's the solution to that? So what happens is we throw energy, money, and effort at symptoms, and we never address the root cause. Like, to your point about the black kid that doesn't have the resources that enable him to get to the football practice on time every day.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the problem there?
Right.
The problem is, why is this kid in this position? And then connect it to the dots. Does he have a dad? Right? Yeah. Who's he hanging around with?
That's right.
Right? What kind of access does he have to a mentor or a big brother? Mm-hmm. Right? Isn't there a way to get him some used clothes? Isn't there a way for the school to raise money so he can have a pair of cleats? Yeah. Right? These are all, let's get to the source of the problem. It's not because he's a black kid. It's not because of the color of his skin. Right. It's because of the circumstances that he's in, that the black community in large part has created, and the black community in large part refuses to refocus their energies on, because white people can't fix the ills of the black
Mark,
community.
I have a take on it. I don't think it's the black community at all. I think it's the white community projecting their ways on the black community. So we all have to take responsibility for our own groups and help one another. I'm all into that, but I really don't blame. This goes back to what Malcolm X was saying, right? Don't take their money. Look at, if your parents and grandparents and great grandparents were on a welfare system, that's all you know, right? Mm-hmm. So once we started giving these entitlements and these guarantees, they need logical. You don't have to be very smart. In fact, you would be dumb not to take the money. There's a better career and guaranteed future of receiving some kind of social benefit the rest of your life than going out and taking some risk and working hard. So they become attached to this welfare system. Well, maybe years ago was with good intentions. Well, but guess who wrote those systems? It's almost 100% liberal white Democrats.
Yeah, no, I mean, I understand, and maybe I can reframe my response. Is it the responsibility of the liberal white people to stop giving things to people and for asking nothing in return, which creates bad behavior? Or is it the
But
responsibility
it
of
creates a lot of votes.
or does it the responsibility of the Black community to say, no, we see this for what it is, and we're not falling for it? That's
Yeah,
Malcolm X's point, right?
that's exactly right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
And I,
it's both. It's the Black community and the white liberal community.
right. And there's like you said, there's different groups in different all the time. And I think there's a lot of African Americans that say, I don't buy into that. I don't want your handouts.
Dude,
In fact,
if they're
the most of them, I have a lot of my good friends. Nobody wants a handout. And if they did want the handout, they probably wouldn't be my friend, right? But
no, you can, there's one thing to give someone a temporary uplift
mhm,
and say, like, I was working for the homeless coalition a few years back for about 4 years, and they changed leadership, and I didn't see eye to eye with the new leadership. Unfortunately, I left. But so yeah, no, I think all of these issues that we're talking about have kind of the same core, where the government, I don't care what side you're talking about, the government is entrenched, right? We call it the swamp, we call it the DC elite.
mhm.
They're entrenched. They're in such elite, positively, financially
Yep.
cushy, no accountability circumstances that all they do is spend their energy trying to say, how can we preserve our positions? Fuck
Right.
everyone else. That's what
Well,
it
that's
is.
where the white guilt comes in, right? That's where the
Yeah.
white guilt comes in because they're so out of touch. They've never lived in those. They don't really have a true understanding of how those communities work or what is really going on because they're most of them, and I know I'm being general, but I think it's fair to say, especially at the highest levels of government, they're complete elitist.
Oh, dude,
They
I think it's still the case that Joe Biden has not been to the southern border. He's like,
but even look at look at his administration. Most of them are Ivy Leaguers, right? And so
I, yeah, I think that my point on Biden is that you just said they have no notion of what the average person does.
yeah,
Well, that's the same idea. I mean, if he gave a shit about immigration, at least go down and take a look.
yeah,
Why are you getting secondhand information for something that at least half the country thinks is a really serious problem?
yeah.
Like, go take a peek,
Yeah,
you
they
know?
fundamentally believe that all problems, all solutions to all problems is more money. And the
Yeah.
only way you get more money is you tax more or you take from one group and add to the other, which that's a fundamentally flawed
Well, I
mentality.
mean,
That
it's just, look, anybody that thinks that the electrician that graduated from high school opened up his own business and is now employing 20 people and has a family of 4 kids that are all destined to go to college, that guy should be spending his tax money for the guy that went to college and didn't pay for his tuition. Like, who believes that? Who
Hey,
believes
Mark,
that?
one more on this, since if you truly cared about, let's just use the blacks as a group, right? Black Americans, if you truly cared about uh, that group, like many groups, no different than the Irish in your case, the Italians in my case, the Latinos in my, my other side of the family, they worked hard, but if you let that many immigrants into a country, where do you think those jobs go? They don't go to the people that are here. They naturally are going to go to, and that's to go to a job site right now, right? It's 90,
I got one right
9,
next door to me. They're building
yeah,
a house right next door
it's
to me.
98% Hispanic, which good
Yep.
for them, right? But let's just be, if you really cared that much about a group of kind of working themselves up, you wouldn't keep them on a welfare system for 50, 60 years like you have, and you wouldn't let all of that inexpensive labor come in to get them off the system. And so it is a party that speaks at, and look at that. I'm sure the other side does the same thing, right? They speak out of both sides of their mouth. And it's kind of fascinating though, right? If you really cared about people, why would you let that many immigrants in and not let those other people take those jobs and work themselves up like every other group it has, right? The
No,
Chinese, the
it's enough.
Irish, the Italians, and
Yep.
and
Yep.
all
Yeah,
of them.
no,
So
I think the other kind of theme in all of this is we're making decisions based on what we believe is happening today,
Yeah.
with no consideration for the repercussions 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, whether it's the green energy thing or gun control or racial policies or, equal opportunity. None of these like diversity, equity, and inclusion, for instance. If we continue to put people in positions they're not qualified for, or they're less qualified for than other people, simply because of the color of their skin or their gender or their particular group classification, eventually that system breaks down. The company goes out of business, the shareholders sell their stock, the best employees go elsewhere. One of those things happens, and no one's sitting here going, and we don't do this. If you were going to put a business plan together, you do projections for a year, 3 years, 5 years, maybe 10, right? We don't do this in other areas of our life. We plan for the future. When you get married, you probably have already spoken to your wife about how do you feel about the kids and how many kids do you want? What religion do we want them to be raised in? Let's talk about sex. Let's talk about money. Let's talk about all these things with our future in mind, not what's going to pleasure us today.
You have to learn how to balance your checkbook. But we have a government that never balances their checkbook.
No.
Every time they need more money, they just start printing it or start borrowing it. And then you wonder why it's just not sustainable. So
there's not one of these themes that we've talked about: critical race theory, DEI, ESG, toxic masculinity, LGBTQ, preferential treatment, men swimming in pools with women and going into women's locker rooms. I mean, none of these things are sustainable if you map them out 5 or 10 years into the future. They're just serving a certain small selfish group of people right now under the guise of compassion, when in fact you're not being compassionate. You're harming these people. You're teaching them the wrong things that will allow them to have a prosperous, happy life. You're putting them in position that they're going to be miserable and unsuccessful, and no one's willing to talk about that.
Yeah, I'm going to wrap this one up by saying the one thing that we as a country was after World War II, where we were united, right? Because being American was the first and most important thing. That's why I don't speak Spanish, and that's also why I don't speak Italian, because my grandmother told me when they came here that her parents spoke Italian only in the household, and they wouldn't speak it publicly because they want to, and their kids really weren't allowed to speak it. They wanted them to become Americans, and same with my dad's side, right? So, and it worked out pretty darn good for us too. That's the other thing. Had they not done that, or they went all in on being part of a group and then not less become part of the American system and benefit from all the things, then I wouldn't be here talking to you. So,
dude, look, I love, for instance, the Mexican culture. I like Mexican food. I see these guys next door. They're working really hard. They're smiling. They're laughing. They're predominantly Christian. They predominantly believe in God.
Oh yeah, immigration is so important. We need those guys coming here. Yeah.
And you know what? I want some of that culture. But you have to learn how to speak English, and you have to understand that this is America, and we do things in a certain way, and we have a constitution, and we have a Bill of Rights, and then we have a set of laws, and we have certain manners and certain, when I get,
that's why you came here, right? That's why we all came here.
So why would you come to this place for that and then do things that are going to destroy that?
Yeah,
right?
I would say the vast majority of immigrants learn to speak English and want to become part of this.
No question.
So yeah, but again, this is back to our so-called leaderships, and that's what this, I guess, topic was going to be about: leadership. Is that what you did your
well? I think
LinkedIn post on leadership?
I did.
It's weak leadership. We have probably the weakest leadership.
It's an absence of leadership. It's not even weak leadership. It's an absence of leadership.
Yeah.
And I think that, and then you got to throw Trump in there, regardless of how you feel about him, because look at what's going on with him right now. And I'm not even professing to be a fan of his or not a fan of his. That's irrelevant. What's happening right now is he is being pursued criminally for ridiculous things for one reason, because they don't think they can beat him at the poll, right? and they're petrified of him. He's the one guy out of all these people that are running.
Yep.
DeSantis, maybe. DeSantis is a politician, but he's also a lot of other things. He's a Navy SEAL. He's an attorney. Yeah. He was a competent, almost semi-pro baseball player. He's got, if there was any dirt on DeSantis, we would have found it out. Or
they're going to create it as they, they do.
Oh yeah. But my point is, they're pursuing Donald Trump criminally because they don't think they can beat him at the polls. And Trump is the only one running on either side that says, I don't need your money. I don't want your money. I want all you old people that are in positions of power and just sitting on your asses doing nothing. I want you out. I want new people in. I want the FBI to be flipped upside down. I want the Justice Department to go. I'm getting Putin out of Ukraine. I'm turning on the pipelines again. I'm building that fucking wall, and we're going to start tracking who comes in here and where they're going. And that scares the shit out of all of them. I think it's wonderful.
It's like you're saying, Mark, there's a globalist agenda, and there's a group of people that are in power, not just in the US, that have decided this is the way it's going to go. And part of the way it's going to go is we've got to weaken America.
Yep.
In order to weaken America, then these other countries, we can all come together, and this is the way. And I have to say, I'm optimistic, by the way, in general, because especially like with stuff with Target and Bud Light, I think a lot of these things are coming out. I'm really excited about the new media platforms that are now going to exceed the viewership of the so-called mainstream, CNN, even Fox. They're going to continue to go kind of on a decline, and you'll see these other ones with curated content that's to a market. I see a lot of positive things going on. Even the Elon Musk thing is huge.
I think Elon Musk, I think even Bill Maher and Joe Rogan, these are people that are standing up just simply about freedom of speech. Musk is talking about other things, but these other guys were either moderates or liberals, and they probably still are on many issues, but none of them are interested in anybody telling them what they can say, what they can do, where they can be, what they have to call other people. None of them want anything to do with that. And they have microphones and they have big audiences.
Yeah,
so
they do.
That's only
I mean, this whole white guilt thing, there's nothing positive that comes from that at all.
No. Your word dignity, I think, is the proper way to look at that. You're asking people to give up their dignity. And if someone asks me to give up my dignity and I just give it up, shame on me.
Yeah. I'll share this one story and we'll wrap this up. But I was in Vegas on a conference last year. So I was at the Four Seasons at the bar, and I was just having a drink, and these two guys walk in, nice guys, like in their 20s, or late 20s, 30s, or something like that. So we started talking. They said they offered to buy me a drink, so we started drinking. I go, "What are you guys doing?" So it turns out they were two military guys. But the one guy was totally tatted up, and you never know he's military. But they were good friends, and they connected. Because that's right. One lived there. The other guy came in, and they were there to see the Def Leppard concert, the rock concert. So that was happening like 500 yards from the Four Seasons in Las Vegas at this Mandalay Bay conference there. So anyway, we start talking, and he says, I'm privileged. So, but first he's telling me a story, really fascinating story. Also one of those great stories that you appreciate how important military is in everybody's life, right? And so I learned a lot from these guys, because they were saying, yeah, we're still the best of friends. And I said, so I asked sort of questions about their military experience, and they said it was the best experience they ever had. They got to go see all over the world. And then he started talking about his childhood, and he didn't have his mom and dad. He was pretty much on his own, and he turned. And then now we fast forward to his 30. He has a pension. He had a business. He stayed in the military for years. He learned how to work on an airline. So he's a pilot. Great guy. Both of them, they had this in common. So he starts off and he says, I'm privileged. And I said, hey, at this time we had a couple of drinks. I was like, hey, time out. Hold on. What did you just say? He says, I'm privileged. I go, really? Obviously, no disrespect, but we know each other well enough. I'm not I'm not criticizing you. I'm not disrespecting you, but I'm calling bullshit on that. You just told me your life story. You pulled yourself up from nothing. And somehow, because thanks to the military and your hard work, you have something here. And so it's funny because his friend was kind of a little more on the conservative side. He wasn't this guy was far on the left. That's the other thing I was asking him. I said, I thought military guys were more down the center right. And he says, no, not at all. There's military is different people. That's what's so great about the military. There's a lot of guys like me that feel this way. And I said, that's cool. You know, it's what's great about our military, right? So anyway, I kind of did, and we had a lot of fun. And in the end, I think I had an impression. I said, you don't need, I stopped saying that privilege shit. Like, why do you need to say that? At the end of the day, it's economics, right? It should not be about skin color. If anybody that's come from nothing, that worked hard, showed up, and then was rewarded from that, you don't need to say privilege to that. But it was just, and he laughed about it, and I think I made him think about it. But it's just great. And then the end of the story, and then I want to hear your comments on it. They said, "Hey, you want to go to the Def Leppard concert with us? We got an extra tickets." I was in my swim trunks because I was at the pool all day long, and I literally with flip flops and my shorts and a t-shirt went to the Def Leppard concert with them, and we had the great time. And I'm sitting there watching Def Leppard play. It was hilarious.
Yeah, that's funny. No, yeah. I mean, anybody coming from that background, and I assume he was white.
He was white, and so was his friend. Yeah,
and would suggest that he was privileged. That's white guilt. That's what the white guilt is.
It was, but I just said in the nicest way, it's so unnecessary. You don't need to say that.
I mean, yeah. I'm not even. You know, you're saying I'm not even asking you to brag about your background or your accomplishments. I'm just saying, what are you apologizing for? You know, what the fuck?
That's what I said. Yeah. And we had fun. He laughed about it and he tried to challenge it, and his friend was giving him shit. And yet again, it goes to show I also learned a lot from them, right? He shared a perspective, how he felt about that. And he had seen parts of the world, especially of the country, you probably know, on the South, that I've never seen in terms of real poor blacks and things like that. I haven't been exposed to that maybe like he has. And he was just trying to share with me that he felt that, politically that was his worldview.
There was this will wrap it up. There was a fable or a story that I heard somehow, somewhere, and I'm going to botch it, but hopefully the principle will come across. You put 10 people in a circle and you ask them all to throw their troubles into the bag in the middle of the circle. And then you ask them, would you want to reach in there and just pull out whatever comes, or do you want your own troubles back? And all 10 of them said, I'll take my own shit. Thank you very much.
That's cool. Great way to wrap it up.
All right, Jim.
All right, Mark. Have a great weekend.
Yeah, you do the same. See you, brother.